JK changes everything for the Minnesota Timberwolves. After all, they didn't just lose a couple of role players this offseason. They tore out a massive chunk of their front court and left themselves with a gaping hole at power forward. And that's exactly the story that sets up everything happening with JK right now. Let's start with what actually happened. Julius Randle got traded to Brooklyn in a 4-team deal that also sent out Minnesota's number 28 pick. And Randle wasn't some small piece either. In his final season with Minnesota, he averaged 21.1 points, 6.7 rebounds, and 5 assists a game. This guy could handle the ball, create his own shot, attack mismatches, and even run offense from the front court. He also had a legendary playoff moment against Golden State in the 2026 Western Conference semifinals, dropping 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 12 assists in Game 3, becoming only the second player in franchise history to record a playoff triple-double. That's the level of player Minnesota let walk out the door. Then things got even bigger. Naz Reid, Minnesota's 6th Man of the Year from the 2023-2024 season, got sent to Charlotte in the same blockbuster that brought LaMelo Ball and Josh Green to Minnesota. Reid wasn't just a bench scorer either. He could play both front court spots, stretch the floor from outside, and give Minnesota spacing without needing the offense to run through him. So think about what that means. In one offseason, Minnesota lost Randle's physicality, his self-created off, his rebounding, and his front court passing. And they lost Reid's shooting, his floor spacing, his bench scoring, and his ability to play as a stretch big. That's not replacing one guy. That's replacing an entire structural piece of the roster. And here's the twist in the story that most people miss. This wasn't some accident or salary dump. It was tied directly to Minnesota landing LaMelo Ball. The full trade sent Reid and a mountain of draft compensation to Charlotte, including a 2033 unprotected first-round pick, first-round swaps in 2028, 2029, and 2030, plus second-round picks in 2029, 2032, and 2033. That's how much Minnesota valued getting LaMelo Ball, who put up 20.1 points and 7.1 assists a game across 72 games with Charlotte last season. So now Minnesota has Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball running the backcourt together. And that changes what kind of forward they actually need next to them. When you've got 2 elite ball handlers and passers, you don't need another guy who needs the ball in his hands all game. You need someone who can run the floor, attack closeouts, finish above the rim, defend multiple spots, and thrive without dominating the ball. That description right there is basically a blueprint for JK. By the way, if you guys enjoy these deep dives, I'll be posting every day. I genuinely appreciate if you could subscribe. Thanks. Anyways, now let's talk about why JK fits that exact blueprint. He's 23 years old. He was the number 7 overall pick back in the 2021 draft, and he spent his first 5 seasons with Golden State before getting traded to Atlanta during the 2026 deadline. His career hasn't been perfectly smooth, but the physical tools have never been in question. He's built like a 6'7" forward with legit vertical explosion and the speed to play either as a wing or a small ball 4. And that versatility matters a ton for Minnesota, specifically because they already have Rudy Gobert anchoring the middle and Jaden McDaniels holding down size and defense on the wing. JK slots in as another physically dominant forward who doesn't force Minnesota to sacrifice size to add athleticism. He fits the mold without breaking the mold. In fact, reports came out saying JK is expected to start for Minnesota right alongside LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Rudy Gobert. That's not a bench flyer signing. That's Minnesota handing him the exact seat that Randle used to occupy. Now let's look at his actual numbers, because the raw stats don't necessarily scream superstar. Across 294 career games, JK is averaging 12.5 points and 4.2 rebounds a night. His best season came in 2023-2024, when he averaged 16.1 points a game and started 46 of his 74 appearances. Last season, split between Golden State and Atlanta, he averaged 12.5 points and 4.2 rebounds overall, including 12.2 points a game in 16 regular season appearances after landing in Atlanta. Those numbers alone don't look like a franchise-altering signing, but that's actually the entire point of this story. Minnesota isn't betting on what JK has already done statistically. They're betting on what he represents physically and developmentally. Randle was 31 years old when he got traded. JK is 23. That's an 8-year age gap. and it lines up perfectly with the core that's still building around a young Anthony Edwards, a young LaMelo Ball, and a still developing Jaden McDaniels. Atlanta actually had a club option on JK worth $24.3 million, and they declined it back in June, making him an unrestricted free agent. That decision is exactly why Minnesota was able to scoop up a former top 7 pick with a legit physical upside on a short and affordable deal. So here's where the story takes its biggest turn. Multiple teams wanted JK. NBA.com confirmed he had offers from the Lakers, the Bulls, and the Trailblazers, and reports during the negotiations had the Lakers offering him something in the range of $20 million over 2 years. $20 million over 2 years. That's a real number, and it's a real offer from a real contender in a massive market. And JK didn't take it. Instead, he agreed to a 2-year deal with Minnesota, reported by NBA.com at $13 million, and later reported by Reuters at $12.4 million, both including a player option in year 2. That's a massive financial gap between what the Lakers were reportedly offering and what Minnesota actually gave him. So why would a guy walk away from roughly $7 million extra dollars? That's the question that makes this signing so much more interesting than a typical free agency move. It wasn't about who paid the most, it was about who offered the clearest path to an actual role. Minnesota didn't need to convince JK he'd eventually earn playing time. They had an open starting spot sitting right there, created by trading away Randall and Reed, and they told him exactly what that opportunity looked like. Reports even indicated Anthony Edwards himself was personally involved in recruiting JK to Minnesota, which says a lot about how much the front office and the locker room wanted this specific fit. So when you put the entire sequence together, it tells a much bigger story than just another free agency signing. Minnesota traded away Julius Randle, losing a front court creator and playmaker. They traded away Naz Reid, losing a floor spacing scoring big. They added LaMelo Ball, completely changing the identity of their backcourt. And then they went out and signed JK, a 23-year-old athletic forward with serious untapped upside to fill the exact vacancy those moves created. He didn't take the biggest offer on the table. He took the clearest opportunity. And that decision alone is why this signing means so much more for Minnesota than the numbers on the contract might suggest. JK didn't arrive in Minnesota as some finished product. He arrived as a guy with one of the most complicated and contradictory resumes in the entire league. And once you break down that resume, it explains exactly why this signing carries so much weight. Golden State took him with the number 7 overall pick back in 2021. He came straight out of the G League Ignite program instead of college, and he entered the league at just 18 years old. NBA.com lists him at 6'7" and 225 pounds, which already tells you the physical profile teams were excited about. He wasn't picked that high because his game was polished. He was picked that high because the ceiling was enormous. And here's the wild part of his story. 1 year after getting drafted, he was already an NBA champion. The 2021-2022 Warriors beat Boston 4-2 in the finals, and that gave Golden State its 4th title in 8 seasons. JK was part of that roster. He was only 19 years old during that championship run, and NBA.com even pointed out he was the first player from the G League Ignite program to ever make it to the finals. So think about that for a second. Before JK had even turned 20, he already had a championship ring. He'd already played alongside Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. He'd already played under Steve Kerr in the highest pressure environment in basketball. That's a resume most players never build in their entire careers. And he had it before he could legally rent a car. But here's where things get complicated. Winning a championship as a teenager doesn't mean he was already a fully formed player. As a rookie, he was mostly used as a developmental piece. He averaged 9.3 points, 3.3 rebounds, and 1.9 assists across 70 regular season games. His playoff role was even smaller. He only played 8.6 minutes a game in the postseason that year, putting up 5.2 points and 1.7 rebounds. So the championship is real, but it wasn't built off JK being a central piece. He was a teenager learning the league while surrounded by future Hall of Famers. His development actually started picking up steam the next 2 seasons. In year 2, he bumped up to 9.9 points, 3.4 rebounds, 1.9 assists, and he shot 52.5% from the field. Then came the season that everybody points to when they talk about his upside. In the 2023-2024 season, JK averaged 16.1 points, 4.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 0.7 steals, and 0.5 blocks across 74 games. He started 46 of those games, played 26.3 minutes a night, and shot 52.9% from the field. That 16.1 scoring average is still the highest of his entire career, and it's the exact reason people believe there's another level to unlock. Then things got shaky again. The very next season, his role became unstable. He averaged 15.3 points, 4.6 rebounds, and 2.2 assists, but he only appeared in 47 games and started just 10 of them. His efficiency dropped too, shooting 45.4% from the field and 30.5% from three. So the pattern with JK in Golden State became painfully clear. Big flashes of talent, followed by stretches where he completely disappeared from the rotation, and that instability hit its lowest point right before he got traded. NBA.com reported that JK played in only 7 of Golden State's previous 38 games before Golden State finally moved on from him. 7 out of 38. For a former number 7 overall pick, that's about as clear a sign as you can get that something had to change. So on February 5th, 2026, Golden State traded JK, along with Buddy Hield, to Atlanta in exchange for Kristaps Porzingis. That ended his 4.5-year run with the Warriors, and almost immediately, Atlanta got a glimpse of exactly why teams never gave up on his potential. In his Atlanta debut on February 24th, JK dropped 27 points on 9 of 12 shooting, adding 7 rebounds and 4 assists against Washington. That's about as strong of a first impression as you can make with a new team. But even that debut didn't fully stabilize things. Atlanta held a $24.3 million club option on him for the following season, and in June, they declined it, making him an unrestricted free agent. So by the time free agency opened, JK wasn't some finished, proven star hitting the open market. He was a talented, unpredictable, physically dominant forward, still trying to figure out where he truly belonged. Now here's where the story gets really interesting, because Minnesota already knew exactly what JK was capable of. They didn't have to guess. They lived through it. Back in the 2025 Western Conference semifinals, Golden State and Minnesota played a 5-game series, and across those 5 games, JK's scoring totals were 7, 18, 30, 23, and 26 points. Just look at that progression. He started slow, and then he completely took over as that series went on. His final 3 games in that series were absolutely ridiculous. In Game 3, he scored 30 points in 36 minutes, shooting 11 for 18 from the field, 3 for 4 from 3, and 5 for 6 from the line, while grabbing 6 rebounds, dishing 3 assists, and blocking 2 shots. He shot 61.1% from the field in that game, with a true shooting percentage of 72.7%. Golden State still lost that game, 102-97, but JK's +5 was actually the best mark on the entire Golden State roster that night. In Game 4, he followed that up with 23 points in 30 minutes, shooting 6 for 13 from the field and 11 for 12 from the free throw line. And then in the elimination game, Game 5, he scored 26 points, going 11 for 23 from the field and 3 for 9 from 3. NBA.com's own recap of that game specifically called out JK's 26 points off the bench. Minnesota still won that game 121-110 and advanced to the Western Conference Final, but JK was still out there dropping 26 on them, even as his season ended. Add up those final 3 games, and JK scored 79 points in just 98 minutes. That works out to 26.3 points per game over that stretch, shooting 51.9% from the field, 40% from 3, and 81% from the free throw line. Now, to be fair and accurate, his full series average across all 5 games was 20.8 points, along with 3 rebounds and 1.2 assists, while shooting 54.3% from the field, 42.1% from 3, and 74.1% from the line. That 20.8 number is what people are talking about when they bring up how JK torched Minnesota in the playoffs. It's not just one big shooting night, it's a full series average against a team that eventually made it all the way to the conference final. And now that exact player is putting on a Minnesota jersey. That's where the revenge tour narrative comes from, and honestly, it's not some made-up storyline. It's rooted directly in the numbers. JK personally lit up Minnesota's defense for 30, 23, and 26 points in 3 straight games during that series. Minnesota won anyway, but he was one of Golden State's most dangerous offensive weapons in the games that mattered most. Now, to be clear, there's no actual evidence that JK holds some personal grudge against Minnesota. The more accurate way to frame it is that Minnesota is one of the teams that saw firsthand just how dangerous his combination of size, speed, and scoring could be in a playoff setting. And instead of continuing to prepare game plans to slow him down, Minnesota's coaching staff now gets to build game plans that put him in position to create that same kind of damage for their own team. So when you line up the entire arc, it tells one continuous story. A number 7 pick who won a title as a teenager, a player who flashed a 16.1 scoring season while also getting buried in Steve Kerr's rotation for stretches at a time. A player who exploded for 20-plus points a game against Minnesota in the playoffs, only to get traded away from Golden State less than a year later. A player whose next team declined his option just months after that. And now, a player joining the very franchise he once tortured in a playoff series, given a real chance to show that what Minnesota witnessed on the other side of the court wasn't a fluke. The player who once made life miserable for Minnesota's defense now gets to make life miserable for everybody else's defense instead. JK had a decision to make this offseason, and the numbers alone don't explain why he made it. Because on paper, Minnesota wasn't even the best financial option sitting in front of him. Minnesota signed him to a 2-year deal worth $12.4 million, with a player option on the second season, according to ESPN and Reuters. NBA.com reported the same basic structure, but listed the number at $13 million. Either way, that's the deal he actually signed, but the Lakers were in the mix too. And reports had Los Angeles offering something in the range of $20 million over 2 years. Some later reporting even suggested the Lakers explored a bigger sign and trade framework to get him. So do the math on that gap. $20 million versus $12.4 million. That's roughly a $7.6 million difference in total reported value. And it's not like Minnesota made up for it with a longer contract either. Both deals were 2 years. This wasn't Minnesota trading length for lower average value. This was just genuinely less guaranteed money, plain and simple. Chicago and Portland were also reportedly involved in the pursuit. So JK had real options. Multiple teams wanted him, and he still chose the one offering him less money. That's the part of the story that actually mattered. Now let's talk about why the player option in year 2 is such a big deal. It's not just a second guaranteed season sitting on paper. It's a player option, which means JK controls what happens after year 1. Instead of locking himself into a long-term valuation, right after one of the rockiest stretches of his career, he's giving himself a chance to reassess everything quickly. If he plays well in Minnesota, he can walk right back into free agency with a completely different resume and a completely different price tag. So this deal isn't just, quote, I took less money. It's, I took less money right now in exchange for control over my future value. And that timing matters a ton because JK's market had gotten murky. He was the number 7 overall pick. He was an NBA champion as a rookie. He averaged 16.1 points a game in his best season. He flashed serious upside multiple times, but he also bounced in and out of Golden State's rotation, got traded to Atlanta, and then had Atlanta decline his $24.3 million club option just months later. That's not the resume of a guy with a clean, obvious market price. That's a guy the league genuinely isn't sure how to value yet. Minnesota gave him a chance to change that perception instead of just cashing a check based on uncertainty. Here's the thing people miss about this signing. The biggest thing Minnesota offered wasn't dollars, it was clarity. NBA.com reported JK is expected to start alongside Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, Jaden McDaniels, and Rudy Gobert. Think about how valuable that is for a player whose entire career problem has been role instability. He's not walking into Minnesota wondering where he fits. The fit is already built. Julius Randle is gone. Naz Reid is gone. The power forward spot is sitting wide open, and Minnesota built its plan around JK stepping directly into it. Compare that to where he came from. Golden State was a championship organization with an established pecking order. Steph Curry ran the off. Draymond Green ran the connective tissue of the whole team. Klay Thompson held a massive historical role before he left. Steve Kerr's system demanded complex reads and off-ball movement from everybody on the floor. JK's athleticism was never in question there. His place in the hierarchy was, and by early 2026, he'd played in just 7 of Golden State's previous 38 games before getting traded away. 7 out of 38 for a former lottery pick. That's the environment he was walking away from. Minnesota offered the opposite, an organization that built an actual defined role for him before he even signed. And here's what makes that role so attainable for him. JK doesn't need to become Anthony Edwards. He doesn't need to become LaMelo Ball. He doesn't need to be Minnesota's primary scoring option at all. He needs to become an efficient fourth option who capitalizes when defenses key in on the stars around him. If Edwards draws extra defensive attention, JK attacks the gap. If Ball gets downhill and collapses the defense, JK cuts. If Gobert occupies the paint, JK operates from the perimeter and attacks closeouts. That's a completely different job than trying to be a number one scoring option, and it's a job that fits his skill set far better. The roster itself is a massive part of the pitch too. This isn't JK signing onto a rebuilding situation, hoping things eventually click. NBA.com specifically described Minnesota as a legitimate Western Conference contender when this deal was reported. So he's not just getting a starting job, he's getting a starting job on a team that's actually built to compete. Starting minutes plus playoff basketball plus a competitive roster plus a defined role. That combination almost never comes packaged together for a player trying to reset his career. LaMelo Ball's presence makes all of this even stronger. Ball is an elite offensive creator and passer, which means JK doesn't have to manufacture his own offense from scratch every time down the floor. His best qualities show up when he's attacking advantages that other players create, not when he's forced to invent those advantages himself. A guy who can sprint into space, cut behind a defense, and finish above the rim becomes exponentially more valuable next to a table setter like Ball. And then there's Anthony Edwards, which makes the entire equation even easier for JK. Minnesota already has its franchise scorer. That means JK doesn't walk in under pressure to prove he can be a first option. His job can simply be complementary. Edwards draws attention. Ball creates. Gobert anchors the middle. McDaniels provides length and shooting. And JK attacks whatever gaps are left over. That's a fundamentally lighter, more sustainable assignment than trying to be a franchise cornerstone on night one. There's also a defensive safety net built into this roster that benefits JK specifically. He has real physical tools on that end, but consistency on defense has been one of the recurring questions throughout his career. Minnesota surrounds him with Rudy Gobert protecting the rim, Jaden McDaniels locking down length on the perimeter, and Anthony Edwards handling a ton of point of attack responsibility. JK doesn't have to be Minnesota's entire defensive system. He gets room to play aggressively because the infrastructure around him covers for mistake. All of this ties back into why the short contract actually makes sense strategically. A long-term deal would have forced JK to accept a valuation based on what the league currently believes about him right now, which, given his up and down history, isn't exactly favorable. The Minnesota deal avoids that trap completely. It's a 2-year bridge. If things don't click, he still secured a real role on a contender and kept his career moving forward. If things do click, he walks into his next contract negotiation with a completely rewritten resume. The player option gives him even more control over exactly when that negotiation happens. So here's the actual math JK is betting on. Less money now, in exchange for more responsibility, which leads to a genuine opportunity to produce, which builds a stronger resume, which sets up a stronger next contract. That chain isn't guaranteed to play out, but it's a rational bet, especially for a 23-year-old with plenty of runway left in his career. And that age piece matters more than people realize. JK isn't 28 or 29, trying to squeeze out one more contract before his prime ends. He's 23 years old, sitting right in the window where he should be building the best version of his game. He's already got championship experience, playoff experience, starting experience, and even some trade experience under his belt. The one thing missing from that list has been role stability. Minnesota is the first organization that's handed him that on a silver platter before he even played a game for them. Now, to be fair to the Lakers, they weren't some lesser option he passed on for no reason. Los Angeles offered a massive market, a historic franchise, a chance to play next to Luka Doncic, and reportedly, more guaranteed money. That's a legitimate package, but Minnesota offered something more specific and more useful for exactly where JK is in his career. A starting power forward role, custom built around what he actually does well on a basketball court. So the full picture isn't, quote, he chose less money. The full picture is, he chose more control and a clearer basketball path over a bigger paycheck. He's not rejecting money outright. He's trying to maximize the value of his next contract instead of settling for whatever the market currently thinks he's worth. The player option basically works like a built-in escape hatch too. If JK has a big breakout year, he's not locked into staying on the same track for another season regardless. He gets a decision point. And that lines up the incentives for both sides perfect. Minnesota wants him productive enough to help them win now. JK wants to be productive enough to cash in on a much bigger deal down the line. Those two goals point in exactly the same direction. At the end of the day, this wasn't a guy leaving money on the table for no reason. This was a 23-year-old former lottery pick betting on himself, choosing a starting job over a bigger paycheck, and choosing a legitimate title contender over simply maximizing financial security. Less guaranteed money right now, a whole lot more control over what happens next. Minnesota's whole offseason comes down to one real question. Can JK make this new version of the roster actually work? Because this was never really about replacing Julius Randle's numbers or Naz Reid's shooting. It's about whether this new group of pieces fits together at a higher level than what Minnesota had before. Let's lay out the starting five one more time. LaMelo Ball running the offense. Anthony Edwards next to him. Jaden McDaniels on the wing. JK at the 4. Rudy Gobert anchoring the middle. That's the group NBA.com has reported as Minnesota's expected starting lineup. And once you actually look at it, it tells you almost everything about where this team's ceiling now sits. Start with the fact that JK isn't being asked to be Julius Randle. Randle averaged 21.1 points a game for Minnesota, but he also shot just 39% from the field and 24.4% from three during the playoff. Reid was a completely different weapon, a sixth man of the year who spaced the floor from the front court. Minnesota lost two very different offensive tools when those guys left. JK doesn't replace either one directly. Instead, Minnesota is changing the entire equation. LaMelo Ball now gives this team a legitimate second high-level table setter, averaging 20.1 points and 7.1 assists a game last year. That means JK doesn't need to be a go-to scorer. He can be the transition runner, the cutter, the offensive rebounder, the closeout attacker, the physical finish. That's a completely different value proposition than trying to replace Randle's scoring one-for-one. Now here's the biggest ceiling argument for this whole move. Anthony Edwards finally gets a different ecosystem around him. For years, Edwards has carried a massive share of Minnesota's offensive creation. Now he's got LaMelo Ball next to him, a guy who can initiate offense and deliver the ball into space at an elite level. That changes what Minnesota can ask of everybody else on the floor, including JK. Instead of catching the ball at the top of the key and being forced to create something out of nothing, JK can now catch the ball after the defense has already been compromised by Ball or Edwards. That's a massive difference in difficulty. Think about the hierarchy this creates. Ball creates, Edwards attacks, JK finishes the advantage. That's obviously simplifying things, since Edwards and Ball can both score and create on their own, but it captures the potential division of labor here. JK doesn't need 20 shots a night to matter. If Edwards and Ball force a defense to rotate, JK attacks the open space. If defenses stay home on him instead, that just opens up more room for Edwards and Ball. Either way, Minnesota wins. And this works both ways with Ball specifically. Ball is most dangerous when he's manipulating a defense with his passing, and JK gives him a running mate who can sprint into space, cut behind defenders, finish above the rim, and turn an advantage pass into an easy 2 points. That's a very different relationship than Ball would have with a stationary shooting, big standing in the corner. Same logic applies with Edwards. If Edwards beats his defender off the dribble, the help defense has to make a decision, collapse on Edwards, and JK is free to cut. Stay attached to JK, and Edwards gets more room to operate. Switch a smaller defender onto JK, and now Minnesota is hunting a mismatch in the post or on the perimeter. JK doesn't have to dominate the ball to create stress on a defense. His athleticism alone forces decisions. Now bring in Jaden McDaniels, put McDaniels, JK, and Gobert on the floor together, and Minnesota suddenly has three players with real size and length across the front court. McDaniels handles the tough wing assignments. Gobert protects the rim, JK takes on physically demanding forward matchups and adds another athletic body to the mix. That gives Minnesota a big defensive shell, while adding way more explosiveness at the power forward spot than they had a year ago. The JK and McDaniels pairing is actually really interesting because they aren't redundant. McDaniels is the more natural defensive special. JK brings more downhill offensive force, so Minnesota can use them as complementary pieces instead of overlapping. McDaniels covers perimeter defense and connective play. JK brings scoring pressure and physicality. The two skill sets don't need to duplicate each other, they just need to fit together. And then there's Rudy Gobert, who honestly makes this entire JK experiment a lot easier to buy into. Minnesota can afford to let JK play aggressively and take chances because Gobert is standing behind him as a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Gobert brings size, rim protection, rebounding, and screening. That means JK can operate further from the basket without Minnesota sacrificing its interior identity at all. And offensively, Gobert's screens can spring open driving lanes for both Ball and Edwards, putting JK right in the middle of that secondary action. So when you zoom out, this lineup really breaks into 5 clear jobs. Ball creates and passes. Edwards scores and attacks. McDaniels defends and adds length. JK brings athletic scoring, transition speed, and physical pressure. Gobert protects the rim and holds down the interior. That's a much more coherent group than just looking at 5 names on paper. The biggest new advantage this roster gets is pure athletic pressure. Minnesota's old front court had more offensive versatility with Randall and Reed. This new front court has more vertical and horizontal athleticism. JK runs. Gobert creates pressure at the rim. Edwards attacks downhill. Ball can push the pace. McDaniels sprints the floor. That combination lets Minnesota play faster and create easy opportunities before a defense is even set, which helps offset some of the half-court shooting they lost when Reed left. JK specifically gives Minnesota something Reed never could. He can pressure the rim from further out on the floor. Against defenses that close out hard, he doesn't just catch and shoot, he attacks the closeout. If the defender flies in too aggressively, he drives. If the defense collapses, he passes. If the lane opens, he finishes. That's a different decision tree for opposing defenses to deal with compared to a standard shooting big. Now here's the honest question mark. Spacing. JK is not a proven high-volume three-point shooter. His career three-point percentage sits at 33.2%. That means defenses can't treat him like they used to treat Reed out on the floor. With McDaniels, JK, and Gobert all sharing spacing profiles that lean more toward defense and athleticism than knockdown shooting, Minnesota is leaning more heavily on Ball and Edwards to create enough advantages to make up the difference. That's the actual trade Minnesota made this summer. They gave up some front court shooting in exchange for more playmaking, more athleticism, and more transition pressure. If JK's jumper takes even a modest step forward, this whole equation changes. Defenses can't sag off him anymore. Edwards gets more driving room. Ball gets more passing lanes. Gobert's screens become tougher to defend. McDaniels' cuts get more dangerous. Minnesota's entire spacing profile becomes way less predictable for opposing defenses to plan around. But to be clear, JK doesn't need to explode into a 20-point score for this move to work. If Edwards and Ball stay healthy and productive, JK can add real value with a much smaller offensive workload. Something closer to efficient secondary scoring, transition buckets, cuts, offensive rebounds, and opportunistic drives would be plenty. That kind of contribution takes pressure off Edwards without stealing shots away from Minnesota's 2 primary creators. Defensively, his tools matter just as much. His consistency has been questioned throughout his career, sure, but the physical gifts are real. With McDaniels and Gobert flanking him, Minnesota has the personnel to let JK play aggressive defense without needing him to be the anchor. He just needs to be a legitimate third front court defender who can hold his own in space and in the post. So here's where this all lands. Minnesota lost size in one sense, trading away Randall and Reed's bulk and shooting, but they didn't become a small team. McDaniels still stands at 6'9". JK is roughly 6'7". Gobert is 7'1". What actually changed is the type of size on this roster. Randall gave them power and half-court creation. Reed gave them size plus shooting. JK gives them size plus explosiveness. And that leads to the final question everybody wants answered. Does this quietly make Minnesota a bigger threat in the West? Or is this a boom or bust swing? The honest answer is yes, with a real condition attached. This isn't a reckless gamble. Minnesota didn't give up multiple first-round picks for JK, and they didn't hand him a long-term financial commitment either. 2 years with a player option on a deal worth somewhere between $12.4 and $13 million, depending on the report. The downside here is genuinely contained. The real risk isn't financial disaster, it's fit. If JK's shooting never comes around, if his defense stays inconsistent, and if his decision-making doesn't stabilize, Minnesota could end up with a lineup that's incredibly talented, but tough to space against elite playoff defenses. But if he hits even a portion of his ceiling, Minnesota suddenly has a 23-year-old athletic starting power forward, playing next to 2 dynamic perimeter creators and an elite defensive center. That's an extremely rare archetype to land in free agency, especially on a short-term deal. Minnesota already finished last season as a second-round playoff team. They didn't need JK to save a rebuild, they needed him to be the connective piece between their new backcourt and their existing frontcourt infrastructure. So here's the actual prediction. The upside outweighs the risk. JK probably doesn't turn into an all-star overnight, but the most realistic outcome is a legitimate jump toward becoming a reliable starting forward whose speed, transition scoring, and downhill pressure make Minnesota a genuinely tougher matchup. And if his outside shot takes even a small step forward this season, this stops looking like a simple replacement sign. It starts looking like the exact move that completed Minnesota's push toward the top of the Western Conference. If you guys enjoyed this, I'll be posting every day. I genuinely appreciate if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.